when a brand defaults to express shipping for Mexico, is that actually a customer decision?
Like you suggested, I think in many cases, probably the majority, it's definitely strictly a confidence decision. You know, it's not a decision that's based on data. It's a decision that's based on where they think they feel the most confident.
Brand's head of e-commerce or operations is listening to this podcast right now and hasn't touched their Mexico shipping strategy in the last year. What's the one question that they should ask their team tomorrow morning? Before we continue, I want to ask you a huge favor. Please subscribe. The reason for it is because the algorithm will show you the most interesting and rich conversations. You will be notified when we post a new episode. And obviously, you will help us attract new guests, have richer conversations, grow our audience. So I thank you for listening to us and welcome to LATAM Unboxed. Today, we will talk about cross-border shipping from the US to Mexico. And we have discovered that most brands don't like to admit this. But sometimes what they call a logistics strategy is really just fear with a budget line. And just to make sense of that phrase, I want to start with an example. So, a fashion brand, a toy brand, a consumer goods brand starts getting orders from Mexico. And the opportunity looks obvious because Mexico is a large market, is close to the US, with consumers who want access to international products. But the hard questions begin for a brand. How do we clear customs? How do we avoid surprise duties? How do we protect the customer experience, for instance? How do we keep delivery reliable without destroying our margins? And instead of designing a real Mexico shipping strategy, many brands fall into one of two extremes. They either chase the cheapest postal option and hope the customer experience survives, or they default to express on everything because it feels safer. But what if both decisions are actually the same mistake? What if the real question is not how fast can we ship? What if the better question is what delivery promise protects margins and customer experience at the right cost? So today I'm joined by Leslie Foxhoven, Latin America's Executive Director for Asendia and a cross-border logistics leader with more than 35 years of experience building parcel networks, scaling international mail, and e-commerce operations, helping companies navigate complex markets across Latin America and globally. And together, we're going to unpack a very uncomfortable idea. Faster is not always smarter. So welcome, Leslie. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you.
Awesome, Leslie. So let's start off the conversation with a very interesting question. Okay, for those who are not familiarized with Asendia, let's explain to them who is Asendia and what value do you guys bring to the table to your customers?
Great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I love these topics. So glad to be here. But so Asendia is a global, one of the largest global e-commerce worldwide. We have offices all around our globe, and I am based in the Americas region. We are big service providers from the Americas to Canada and to Europe. We also service Asia. And during the last 2 years, we have inaugurated services to Mexico and Brazil, and we're expanding in Latin America.
Fantastic. So now that we have the context in terms of Asendia, I think it's really good to start with an example, and the example that I mentioned with in my introduction. So when a fashion brand or a toy brand, for instance, pays for express shipping on all their parcels, even though they don't need it, is that out of fear because they don't want the headache? What do you think?
Well, I do think that that's a fair statement. I think that I might want to rephrase that to might not be out of fear, but it's probably out of risk aversion. So they're making those choices because they want to avoid certain risks. So they're making those types of decisions to avoid the unknown.
And what are some of those risks that you are thinking about?
So let's take, for example, any of the brands that you mentioned. They might make a decision that is based around cost. So they want to salvage their cost and make more money. So on the one side, you have brands chasing like a postal solution where they are going to ship their toys, their brands through a postal network to try to avoid the infamous duty and tax. Um, but as a result of that, they might start off on a good foot, but what they're not understanding is over the next 60 days, they'll experience many, many issues. That'll be, lost parcels. That will be shipments that are taking 30 to 45 days. So you're having customers that are not happy. There's a lot of, involvement from customer service, a lot of expense around that. And they end up having to refund the customer and ship it again. So while they chose margin and low cost, it actually cost them more, and they also, lost the customer.
Right.
And on the flip side of that, if they're taking, they want to say, I'm going to ship an express just to ship express, and maybe that's not, in fact, what the client actually wants. So maybe they really don't want 3 to 5 days. So they're going to spend more money with their shipping vendor because they feel less risk averse, and they're going to pay more to get the shipment there faster. Maybe it gets there faster, but now they've made less money. So I think
Right.
they've left that on.
I really love what you're saying because sometimes, for instance, I'm just thinking for cross border customers, let's say in Mexico or in Brazil, in Colombia, when they place an order and they see express shipping, let's say 2 to 3 business days in some cases, that translates into 5 business days if it's not definitive. They probably don't need it that fast. And also, the cost involved for the express shipping is really, really high. And sometimes customers, they just abandon the checkout card or the checkout section because they see, wow, it's going to cost me this much. And I don't actually need that type of solution or that urgency in my shipment. So when I talk about not all orders require express shipment, that's a reality. And globally, everyone talks about the Amazon effect, in which customers became so addicted to next day, same day delivery, but sometimes customers don't actually need that. It's not urgent. And I'm just thinking about an example. I just did this the other day. I was going through Amazon looking for these monitors that basically they gauge the pressure tire in my boat. And
Okay.
in Amazon, they cost like $50. And I was thinking, I'm not need my pressure monitor next day because I'm planning this boat trip in 2 weeks. So I can
Hmm.
wait 2 weeks for this delivery. And it occurred to me, why don't I go and see, okay, if I find that product in Shane or in Temu at 1/10 of the cost? And that's what happened. The same pressure monitor cost $10 in Shane, and the delivery was 10 days, and I was okay with that. So I decided to change my website just because of the delivery preference, because I wanted to save money. I was not in an urgency. So that's a real example of people that may not require an express delivery, for instance. Brands, they want higher conversions, they want better margins, and obviously, they want the best customer experience possible.
Mhm.
And when it comes to delivery, and especially the delivery promise for Mexico, are those three things pulling in the same direction, Leslie, or does optimizing for one quietly destroy the others?
I think that they're far more aligned than most brands realize because many companies think that they have to sacrifice margin to gain a customer's trust or to sacrifice customer experience to improve conversion. But the best logistics is achieving all three of those. So it's kind of what we just talked about. You're trying to achieve only margin, then what's going to happen? Just like we just talked about. You're actually going to typically, not all the time, but end up spending more because you've had so much customer service intervention. You've had clients that aren't always happy. So for the first 6 months, you might make money, but in the end, it'll catch up with you. Or the same as, let's say, you want to gain customer trust, and you think because maybe we haven't done the appropriate homework and we haven't asked our clients what it is they actually want, like you. They might have said, well, we're going to give Diego, we're going to be a superstar, and we're going to show him that we can get this monitor to him in 3 days. Well, the truth is you really didn't care because you're not going on your boat for 2 more weeks. So maybe you would have thought, hey, that was pretty cool. But my P&L suffers, right? So the truth is that the best logistics is the ones that is considering all three of those together and not just chasing one metrics. Yeah.
When a brand defaults to express shipping for Mexico, is that actually a customer decision? Because what we're talking right now is that it may be just a confidence decision based out of fear. And what you have been suggesting is essentially companies are paying a premium not to ship fast, but to avoid trusting a system that they don't understand. So let's talk about what alternatives do companies have, let's say in the US, to ship to Mexico or to Brazil, to other countries in Latin America, that is not postal and that is not express. Let's talk about Mexico, for instance. What are some of the alternatives?
So, first of all, just to backtrack to your question, I think like you suggested, I think in many cases, probably the majority, it's definitely strictly a confidence decision. It's not a decision that's based on data. It's a decision that's based on where they think they feel the most confident, right? So that opens up a whole nother topic. But so a company, like Asendia, it's an e-commerce company that has multiple opportunities. So just when you look at the industry, you have an integrator who is always going to be express. And certainly, people do need express. So that's good to use express when it's required. So I'm not talking about those. Um, and then you have the postal example, which we discussed, which is 30 to 45 days in certain cases. And certainly to Mexico, not one of the most favorite decisions of consumers in Mexico. A company like Asendia, who is a logistics company that meets somewhere in the middle. So might not offer 3 to 4 days, but certainly might offer 8. So we're starting to get into the platform of making all three of those things, margin, customer experience, and service, meet together. So what would you find there going to Mexico? So, you would find at an e-commerce company like Asendia, you would find that you would have a team that's very capable. This is what you'd be looking for. That's very capable to introduce to you all of the new regulations that customs has changed so much. So what's happening? How do we educate you? So it's not a big gorilla or the elephant, understand the rules and regulations slowly, and they can help you adapt to, what it is what you're shipping to Mexico. If it's a toy, what are those regulations, et cetera. The custom solution, so we would cross the border, and then once it gets into Mexico, we have multiple final mile delivery partners. So what you get there is a combination of a service that's maybe 8 days, a little bit longer than an express. So when you look at all of those advantages together, you come up with a solution that's really achieving those 3 factors that most of us want in our businesses and on our P&Ls. And, you know, and a good example is we have a big customer right now that we are moving domestically via road, doing pickups in Arizona, moving that into Laredo, and making deliveries into Mexico City. We have vetted the catalogs. We've put, you know, all the work into that together. So we've combined resources around the with the customs broker on all the products that we're moving in, and it's very smooth. So that whole service from origin to final delivery is averaging about 8 days. And the only way you could beat that with
That's
FedEx
pretty
is
cool.
flying it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's super fast. Yeah, that's really really fast. So let me wrap up the conversation with something that I think connects all the dots, because
Okay.
if a brand's head of e-commerce or operations is listening to this podcast right now and hasn't touched their Mexico shipping strategy in the last year, what's the one question that they should ask their team tomorrow morning? What would you say?
Would ask my team, what are we doing with Mexico? Are we paying for performance or are we paying for assumptions? And I would want to understand what that is and the background of that. And I would just then sit quietly and listen to the response. And the main reason when you look at Mexico, if you have not adjusted or revisited your shipping solution into Mexico in this past year, then certainly most likely leaving a lot on the table, because so many things have changed. You've had customs has changed dramatically over this past year. So many new regulations. Do you have a broker now who's working with those, who's going to train your team to really import more products properly? Are you running risk? Do carrier networks have changed? E-commerce volumes have changed. So there's been so many things that have changed. So if your strategy is a year old, then the assumption is you need to get busy.
What's the main excuse that they will tell you when you're in a meeting presenting this alternative?
I hear a lot, and we always hear this, that it's, you know, it's too expensive, that they want the cheapest price. But when we really talk about that and dig into that, when you have the cheapest price and that's all you're focused on, then that will come back to haunt you down the road. So whether your shipments have been seized in customs, I mean, there's a lot of things. If you're paying for just price, then you could lose at customs severely. I mean, all the way down to if you're importing things on a T1 on a simple T1 that need to be moved in on an A1, then your brand can get blacklisted. So there are some really big issues there that we need to understand.
Just to
So yeah.
clarify, what do you mean by T1 and A1?
Yeah, so a simple T1 is the most simple way to import products into Mexico,
Okay,
you know, and then an A1 is like a formal clearance. So that's more for business to business.
I really appreciate the insights. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having